All right, I think we're on. Think we're live. Just checking my sound. All right, I think we're on. Oops, I gotta turn that down. Think we're live. Checking. Oop. All right. You'd think I'd have this figured out by now, but you'd be wrong. All right, welcome to Friday, everybody. I hope everyone is doing as well as they can be doing at this point. It's crazy times again. I don't think I'm going to go into all the obvious things to talk about. Well, like the big news with Ukraine and Russia invading and all that stuff. I kind of want to just keep this focused on some art and maybe some other things. So maybe it's a little bit of a break from that. There's plenty of news going around, so if you want to watch it, I understand. So I'm working on a painting that I started during like lockdowns from the pandemic. And it's been sitting around in my studio because I don't know where to go with it next. And I think I'm going to resolve some stuff with the smoke and steam coming out of this part of the train right here. Let me make sure I have focus set right. I think I have an autofocus on. Let me get that straightened out, guys. Okay. Keep that locked in right there. All right. Anyway. But but I had been thinking something's kind of brought up an issue that's been coming up in other areas of my life and some people that are friends of mine. And I guess we could talk, it has to do with boundaries themselves, on a personal level, and how to establish and keep someone from crossing your own boundaries, personal boundaries. That might be related to like, bullying. And if you're going to be probably in any business, but I've found like especially in a business where you're dealing with people directly, like customer service or sales or anything like that, or you're selling anything, you're eventually going to run across these kind of people who are going to bully and push you around to get better prices, to get better deals, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's worse than others. Sometimes it's innocuous, just trying to leverage one thing or another. And it's one thing, I've probably found it hard to deal with my entire life. Anyway, I guess we'll go through a stroll from my own personal history here. When I was a little kid, I grew up in a really small town in Wyoming, and it had like 15 families in it. And in the whole town that I lived in, there was probably like 5 or 6 kids my age-ish, around my age, within a few years of my age. And so the dynamics of that, social dynamics, were pretty limited. Like only 2 people or 3 people had to ostracize you to be excluded from the group, and that was the whole town. And there wasn't anybody else for 18 miles away. Like that was it. It was like when I was in kindergarten, I had 6 kids in my kindergarten class, and when I was in 6th grade, there was only 2 of us left, and the whole school only had like 12 to 20 students the whole time I was there, up until I was like 11 years old. So the other thing that happened in the social dynamic is, as it relates to bullying, is that the kids that got bullied were kids who didn't have anybody to stick up for. Like if you had older siblings or older cousins, then you didn't get messed with, because then you'd have to deal with the older sibling, But I didn't have any of that. I was the oldest of, I have a sister, but she was a couple years younger than me. And so I was the oldest kid in my family, and I didn't have any cousins anywhere nearby. All my cousins were like in other states and stuff. So I was an easy target. And plus, shit, sorry about that. I was a small kid too. I wasn't like, a big burly kid. I was like, when I was 12 years old in wrestling, I wrestled in a 103-pound weight class, which is like the lowest you can go almost. So I was a small kid, didn't have any siblings to stick up for me, and so I was ripe for being picked on. I didn't have any other weirdness about me that I remember. They didn't pick on me for anything in particular, but it was just like weird, just like they conjure up things. Like they heard you said something about like you didn't need to fight them because you don't have anything to prove. They're like, and it's some sort of like, like you're gonna beat them up or something. I don't know. It would just make shit up. Then they'd want to fight you, and I wasn't a kid that liked to fight. So I would be spending a lot of my time trying to dodge these kids. But you have to remember, there was like this town comprised of probably 1 or 2 blocks of town. It was like there was nowhere to hide. It was sagebrush in the middle of the prairie, so there was nowhere to run. Either you stayed at home or you ran to school back and forth, and that's how you dealt with the bullies. And so this was kind of the bane of my existence as a kid, was being picked on by the other kids that were older and a little bit bigger than me. And they were probably being picked on by their older brothers or sisters or somebody else that I didn't know about. And they were just dishing it out on me. That's probably what was going on now that I look back at it. The nature of bullying, I guess. And get my reference set up. I'm looking at the video I shot of clouds from a plane I was flying in last fall. So yeah, so I was an easy target for one thing. So let's see, how do I want to do this? And I didn't know how to deal with it. I mean, so what I would do is I would sit the advice I got was from my dad. I would talk to him about it. And at the time, he was building an airplane in his garage. He'd ordered plans from a company in California and then ordered wood and fiberglass and foam and was building a real airplane in his garage because that was his life dream, was to be a pilot, and he wanted a plane that he would be allowed to work on, so he was building it himself. So anyways, while he was working in there in the evenings on building his plane, I would sit on this little shop stool talking to him and complaining about being bullied at school and what should I do with it? I think at the time I was hoping that my dad would come and save me from it. Like he would go and stick up for me, because that's what I want. I dreamed of having an older brother or sister to older brother to come in and just like kick the shit out of the kids that were picking on me for no reason. But that didn't happen. So my dad didn't do that. He didn't go to the other kids' parents. He didn't, that I know of anyways. He didn't do anything to put a stop to it. All he did was give me advice on how to deal with it. And he would just say, well, I guess you got to fight back. You got to stand up for yourself. You got to, and I would, counter, like, well, I'm way smaller. They're way bigger than me, and they're older, and they're tougher. And his advice was, it was just simple. It wasn't, he didn't teach me how to fight. He didn't take me out and show me how to throw punches or anything. He would just tell me, he would just like, well, I guess, you might be smaller, but it's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And dynamite comes in small packages. And he would just give me these pep talks and no real practical advice on what or how to do anything. But I think what he was getting at was that you have to develop a mindset and how to deal with this, because life is full of adversity and full of things that are going to feel like you're being pushed and bullied around. And sometimes it's outside of your control, and it might always be not always be in a way you know how to fight back against it. But So I don't remember what happened. I mean, I remember weird things where I did fight back, and it wasn't, and it turned out that it did work. Even putting up the resistance was enough. There was times where I didn't, and I got punched in the face, and I went home crying, and then it was over for a while, and I felt good. I was like, okay, we got that out of the way. Then it wasn't like a week later that there was some other stupid reason to be fighting, And then this particular bully, he would have the other several kids in my neighborhood, in my town that, they would be on his side. It's like all this. So there's all this crazy social dynamic going on for like little kid in the middle of the prairie of Wyoming. Like, um, but I think that sort of brutality really formed the basis of being able to stomach a lot of the crap it takes to be an adult in the real world. Um, and so, like fighting your way through things may not always be the best solution to a problem, but knowing how to, so there's the knowing how to avoid the fight, come to, to and come out to a resolution. I think that's where one might aim to be. Um, so, as it relates to like, I guess I'm talking to some of the artist friends of mine here in the art business. Um, that's my train of thought. Got lost in the clouds. Is a lot of times you're just going to have to deal with shitty situations, and you're going to have to deal with people who are jerks or pushy or bullying. And it isn't always somebody trying to punch you in the face. Sometimes it's just weird emotional abuse or games that people play to try to like get a one up on you somewhere. It's like, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's just, so how do you deal with that without um, causing problems for yourself? Or just being confrontational to everybody who comes along? Because sometimes it might seem like somebody's one of those people, but, they're not. I think the obvious solution is just to, to avoid as much as possible, but you don't always have the option to do that. Like you might be working at a job where somebody's bullying you in a social manner, like, yeah, the bullying isn't always physical bullying. It can be socially or emotionally or any number of other ways. Um, I think sometimes the hard thing to figure out is to be able to spot these people very early on. And not so you can avoid them, but so that you have a way of negotiating a relationship with them. Because sometimes, like I said, you can't avoid it. And a lot of that has to do with setting your own boundaries of knowing what you're willing to accept. It's not worth accepting emotional abuse to make money. It's, somebody's just outright abusive. You might want to avoid those people altogether. It's not, this hassle isn't always worth the hustle with those kind of people. I don't know if this is looking right. Get my mirror turned around. Let's see. I feel like that should be warmer. I don't know. So when I was a kid, yeah, so I had a couple of memories. I had a memory of being picked on. Then I had a couple of memories where I actually instigated fights with this kid. Like, if instead of just being picked on all the time, I was like, you know what, let's just get it over. Let's fight it out right now. And he didn't want to fight. It was really weird. um, but I remember before I moved out of that town, this kid wanted to fight me again, and I was able to dodge him until we moved out of town. I never had to face him. I saw him years later, but I think he was over it by then. And it's funny, is like, so I moved to a bigger town when I was in middle of sixth grade. I went from being like one of two students in my class to being one of 60 students. And right away, like the class bully, the class, tough guy, you know, I showed up and I was fresh meat again. But, and he was actually scary. This guy, it looked like he'd been to prison and he was only in sixth grade. You know, when I moved there, he had a cast on his arm, and he had a cast on his arm because he broke it punching another kid. And he would just come up to me and pretend like he was going to punch me and just do stuff like that. And all I did was just not acknowledge him very much. And eventually, because I didn't flinch or I didn't back down, I didn't cry, he kind of just moved on. I don't know what happened, and then he kind of liked me. We weren't friends, but he somehow, he respected me in some way. He just, I don't know what happened with him. But the social dynamic was so much different that I wasn't the only kid to pick on. So there was plenty of other people to move on to, which was different than the first town I lived in. And then what happened was, after in seventh grade, I joined the wrestling team because, I remember roughhousing with some of my friends back in Lynch where I grew up. And I always thought that was cool, and I thought, man, I'd like to learn how to wrestle. And I had no idea how tough it was. Like, that was the toughest thing I ever did in my life. Still, probably is like one of the, like, wrestling, being on the wrestling team was just, I don't know why people do it. It was grueling. It's like my first year I started wrestling, I was 103 pounds, and I lost every match the first year until the last tournament of the year. I happened to win both of my matches, and I won the tournament, and that got me so stoked that I decided to go out the next year. But I remember during that wrestling season in my seventh grade year, I wanted to quit really bad. But my dad wouldn't let me quit. He said, "You don't have to try it. You don't have to go out next year, but you can't quit." And so I had to tough it out, and it was grueling. The practices were grueling. It's like lots of running. It's like so much work, and it's like the kind of work where, like, kids are, like, you'd be like ready to vomit. You're running so much and drilling and all this. It's like, when you're like in grade school, you have these ideas of being on sports teams, and it's like it's fun because you're just playing in your backyard or your front yard, and you're just throwing a football around, and it's just like a lot of fun. But then when you join organized sports, it's a lot of work, and then the only fun is on game day, and that only comes every once in a while. So the translation between game day and practice, like, by the time I realized what I was in for, it was too late, I think. Football wasn't ever that tough. I mean, most of the practice was kind of like playing a game. It was kind of fun. There were drills and running and stuff. By the way, I probably hate running because running was always used as a punishment. and I just wasn't a long distance runner. I don't like it. Probably because I was never good at it. Isn't it funny? Like the reason I pursued art my life and my, for everything my entire life is just because I was good at it when I was young. Something I liked to do and I was good at it. And I don't know if I like to do it because I was good at it or the other way around. And I don't know why I'm good at it. I mean, it's weird. Like I feel like I mean, if you just looked at me as like I'm an animal, this is just one of my traits. I've developed in practice and made it something more, I think. But I think that's just because that's what I do, and it's not like I don't feel like I can take credit for it, or that it could be interchanged with blame. Like I can be blamed for these paintings, but it's like, why do you like the things you like, or why, like why are some people good at one thing and other people aren't? I don't know. There are lots of people that are way better at it. So like, yeah, what can you take credit for? I don't know. Yeah, so I was on the wrestling team in seventh grade. I won the tournament at the end of the year, and because of that, I decided I'm going to go out next year because now I know I can win it. So I'm actually maybe I'm kind of good at it. And I think when you're good at something, or you think that you're good at something, you're willing to suffer a little bit more to do it. Like I don't think people want to go through the suffering of something if they're not even good at doing it, and they don't even get the satisfaction of being competent at something. Like I think a lot of artists suffer under the idea that maybe they need to make a living as an artist, and they're willing to suffer that they're not a lot of times because they're good at it, and it doesn't make any sense why they can't make a living just at something that they're really good at. Like good at, you don't have to be really good at most things to make a living at it. So why is being an artist some other thing? Like, and I think that you don't have to be good at it to make a living at it. I think it doesn't hurt to be good at something, but I think the mindset that really more so contributes to like finding commercial or financial success as an artist is just the mindset that I had from being in wrestling, which was how much suffering can you take and not give up? How either bad do you want it, or how desperate are you? So like when it came to making a living as an artist, um, I think there was a mixture of desperation and I would rather do this than any other stupid ass job if if I had a reasonable choice. And when I started, when I was like in my early 20s, I didn't, I didn't have any family or kids or anything to support. So I had the, I had the ability to take a lot of risk. I think people who become, or I guess I'm speaking for myself or people that are in my situation, people who become successful financially with their art are often like they don't have any other options. They don't have any better options, and they're willing to. You see, like I don't know what is it that I risked. I went out to the street and started selling it. I mean, I guess I didn't think of that as a risk. So I had the choice between doing that or working at Macy's folding shirts. I wanted to do both, but my manager wouldn't give me the time off on the weekends. And I made more money selling my art in the street than I did working at Macy's. And not only that, but selling my art in the street was still selling, making money off my art. And that was more in line with what I wanted to do than working at Macy's was, for sure. So that choice didn't seem like all that difficult to make. It was like, make money on your art or work at Macy's folding shirts. I don't like, is that really a choice that was hard to make? No. If Macy's had paid me $15 an hour with benefits, that might have been a lot harder choice to make, because there's security there, or even if it's temporary. And when I started selling my art in the street, that wasn't like my goal. I was like, all right, this is temporary till I get a real job. And that real job never came. Like what I mean by real job is like, being real job as an artist, like working for an animation studio or something. But at the time, the jobs are just really tough. The market was really tough for animators and digital art, like not digital artists. I mean, I didn't have a computer to start out with, and so digital art wasn't as much of a thing as it is now. And I didn't know anybody in these studios. I just didn't. I didn't. I think I just I didn't know how to get into that world. I mean, I was in the neighborhood. That's the reason I moved out to California, was to get into those industries. This is where they all were, and I think mostly still are. This is probably the wrong temperature. I might come in and glaze some orange over all this later. But when I ended up back out on the boardwalk, at first it was all great. But remember the first big weekend was Memorial Day weekend on boardwalk back in, like, this is 1999, and it'd be the first big weekend I had since I had started selling my art out there I would have been out there. So I was pretty stoked for it. It's like, we lots of tourists, I want to make lots of money. And I get out there, you can't sit till 9. So I got out there at about 9 o'clock, and I went down to the south part of the boardwalk where I knew there's just a lot more tourists. And remember that I had been setting up down there on the boardwalk at this point for a couple of months, on the weekends. And I showed up this time, and I just had like a portfolio case with some of my art in it. I didn't have a big setup or anything. And I found a spot, I sat down, and the first thing that happened is a couple of dudes came out and they started yelling at me and cussing at me and telling me I was in their spot. Everybody knew it was their spot. They'd been there for I don't know, like, I've been here forever. Everybody knows this is where I set up, and you got to move. And it was like somebody that was selling beaded jewelry and like a palm reader or something. It was like I was being moved along, moved along the boardwalk. So the first thing that happened was I got bullied by a couple of people that came out and said I couldn't set up where they, but they didn't own the spot. It's first come, first serve, and I got there first. But I was facing the prospect of getting in a fight with somebody on the boardwalk, and that's not what I was there for. And this is the first time I run into any kind of conflict quite like that there. And so I moved along up to the northern part of the boardwalk, quite a ways up, before I found a place to set up, and did just fine. But there were a number of other bullies out there that some of them would pick on people they knew they could beat up, intimidate. It was usually over space on the boardwalk or something like that. But what I found with most bullies is that if it's not easy to bully you or push you around, they'll just move on to somebody else. Because a lot of times they're just kind of weak. They won't fight somebody they're not absolutely positive that will fold. And if they're just crazy, they won't care. They'll they'll make you pay. And which is why they get away with being a bully, is because we don't know, are they the kind of bully that's going to like crush you completely, or are they the kind that's just going to fold and move on to the next person? And nobody really wants to find out. So that's the caveat. Standing up to bullies, you have to be willing to fight. And, I think that comes down to, I think that look at my art, maybe that's what the basis of a lot of it is, like showing people standing up and fighting. They're not fighting anybody in particular, but they've got that attitude of not putting up with no one's shit. And I think there's some value in that. The caveat, I think, is that sometimes people take that to an extreme where, in an effort to not put up with other people's shit, they become the one giving everybody shit. Like they're reacting to everything like it's pushing them around. And so you have to start to be able to recognize, like, is somebody just a jerk, or are they a bully, or what's going on? Or are they just somebody that you can't really trust? Like, are they a time waster or something like that? Or are they full of shit, just hot air? And being able to spot that kind of thing early on, so you don't waste a bunch of time with it. Like, you don't have to you don't have to make everything into a conflict. You just don't want to waste your time on things that aren't um, getting you to an objective you might have in life. Is it a roadblock? Like, are you wasting your time? So ultimately, the other person isn't wasting your time. You're wasting your time by not recognizing it when your time is being wasted. So it's almost like all these little bullies are little personal gurus. Like, as long as you can be fooled by them, you're going to be. So learning to recognize when someone's wasting your time is most of what being an adult is all about. Maybe, I don't know. So everybody gets to decide if their time is being wasted or not. Time is kind of the currency that we have after calories for energy. Like, time is that currency. And I think that becomes more apparent as I get older. Like, painting clouds is fun because you can't get it wrong. I mean, as far as like the shape, it's either it looks right or it looks wrong. Either it looks like clouds or it looks like cotton candy. I don't know. But there's like no anatomy that you can get wrong on. That's why it's kind of fun. I need to do more landscape painting, I think. Help out these other areas that are, yeah, it will improve my studio painting. Like, I know it will, but yet here I don't do it. Like, I never take my own advice. Someday I will. Anyway, welcome to Painting Clouds on Friday. Painting clouds. Got an eye on the YouTube channel. If anybody puts any questions in the comments or has anything to say, I can see it. Three loyal fans here watching me fuck up this painting. This isn't gonna fuck it up. Oh yeah, it's not what I wanted to do. What do I want to do? Let's sort of scumble in some stuff here, like some abstract shapes going. Yeah. Let me see. It's going to be too warm. Anyways, I guess that's my story about bullies. Man, this painting's going to take forever. I don't know why I've decided that on this painting I'm just going to like take forever on it. Tired of being in a rush to get things done. I think also I want to see like just how far I can push on a painting. And I generally stop working on a painting when I feel that I don't want to push it any longer. Like there's a sort of diminishing returns. Like working on it, does does it make it any better, or is it just like sometimes you can make a painting worse by just continuing to overwork it. So I guess what I'm getting is like I don't want to do anything unless I know it's going to add something to the feeling or the contribute to making the painting better or solving a technical issue that could be resolved better, that sort of thing. Like so, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is like I'm kind of come at this painting is like, can I make it better? And I haven't got to the point where I feel like it's close enough. It's close to being called finished. It's like starting to get there. But when it starts to get close to being finished, that's when I have to ask the question: could it be could it be better than? Is there something that can be improved on? Could it be considered finished? And I feel like these smokes and clouds have a lot of room for improvement. I think when something looks finished, it just looks matter of fact and obvious. And right now, these steam and clouds look um, like you can tell what they are, but it doesn't look obvious to me. It's like it doesn't look like doesn't have that immediate um, immediacy about it of something that's just matter of fact. And so I guess that's what I'm learning in this painting is how to achieve these effects in a way that I think just looks exactly how I want it to look, like sort of implying the speed and the mesmerizing. I want to get this sort of mesmerizing feeling, like it just keeps you want to keep staring at it. What's going on here? How does this steam coming up here describe what's happening? Like the speed of the train, the speed of the steam flying off, the volume that it has, like all that stuff. Is it making any sense? I think it's starting to. About as much sense as me talking to myself here. Well, dang, I think I'm gonna call the live stream good for today. Hope your all paintings are going well, whatever you're working on, if you're working on anything. Hope you have a good weekend. Take some time to tune out if you need to. Just you have a peaceful day, a peaceful space around you. Take some, you know, moments of gratefulness for it because some people don't have it, and things can change for anybody on a short notice. So be grateful for the things that we have, I guess. It helps. All right, guys. I will see you all later.